Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... Y'all, I am so sorry it has been a hot minute since my last book review, but life has been absolutely crazy. Good, but nonetheless crazy. Like, I threw my annual Halloween bash, finished up a short film, landed a new job that I had been preparing for, picked up all of our Halloween decorations, then my husband and I went on a vacation to celebrate 3 years of being married. So, even though spooky season has come and gone, I would like to use this opportunity to wrap up my Halloween reading list for this year. And to be honest, I did have a few other titles included in this year's list, but I ran out of time. So, because of that, I've included those titles at the top of next Halloween's TBR. Anywho, now that everyone's been caught up to speed, this weekend I'm reviewing Kill Creek by Scott Thomas, which, to be honest, I had planned to read and review this last year, but I became invested in Jonathan Mawberry's Pine Deep trilogy. So, now that I've had the opportunity to actually read Kill Creek, I can wholeheartedly say that this book scared the ever-loving living hell out of me, and it haunted me long after I finished my read. Also, I would like to add that I buddy read this with my good online friend Hanny, and as always, we had a lot of fun discussing the characters and plot and just racking our brains on where this book was going to go next. And as soon as I finished buddy reading this with her, I told another online friend of mine by the name of Nisa about this book, and she read it within the matter of just a few days, which at this point I had uploaded a TikTok video, which was kind of like a joking reaction of my face after I had read this, and she was cool enough to duet that. So if you're curious about how that went, here you go. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little skit, but without further ado, let's head off to Kill Creek, Kansas, and see what horrors await us at the Finch House. Kill Creek by Scott Thomas introduces a protagonist by the name of Sam, who is a pop horror author suffering from writer's block. And as stressors bear down on him, one day he's confronted by a guy named Wainwright, who's in charge of the online horror site known as Rightwire. From here, Wainwright offers to pay Sam $100,000 for a 2-day-long interview, which is to begin on Halloween. Even though Sam is apprehensive, he eventually gives in to Wainwright. But the day before Halloween, when Sam goes to the hotel where he's supposed to meet Wainwright, he actually encounters 3 other famous horror authors there who Wainwright had gathered under the guise that they were to be interviewed one-on-one. Which, among them, we have the splatterpunk author known as T.C. Moore, the YA Christian horror author known as Daniel Slaughter, and the classic psychological horror author known as Sebastian Cole. Then, after everyone realizes they've been tricked into a group interview, Wainwright explains their live stream will take place at an infamous haunted landmark called the Finch House, which at one point only locals had feared this old gloomy mansion. But because of a non-fiction book called Ghost of the Prairie, this house became the talk of the nation. Despite everyone having the opportunity to back out, they decide to continue forward because they believe this is nothing more than a publicity stunt that will further their careers. Yet, after they spend one night in the Finch House, they discover their stay has awakened something evil. And now that evil entity is craving more power. Due to Scott Thomas having difficulty finding a home for his debut novel, Kill Creek, he had finished its first draft a decade prior to its publication. In previous interviews, Thomas explained no one was interested in publishing a horror novel by a first-time author. He also speculated his career in reality TV, as well as children's TV, were other factors that played against anyone taking a chance on him. Eventually, Kill Creek was given an opportunity with Inkshares, which is a publishing house that provides a feedback community when an author's work is in its draft stage. After the author makes necessary changes to their work, Inkshares runs a pre-order campaign where the author is published after their book reaches its threshold. It was through this experience that Thomas received the constructive criticism he needed that led to Kill Creek receiving a release in 2017. Fun facts! Here's a few things you might not know about Kill Creek. In an interview conducted by Daryl Maxwell with the Los Angeles Public Library, Thomas explained prior to writing Kill Creek, he wondered what would happen if a group of horror authors were placed in a setting where they had a legitimate supernatural experience. Otherwise, Thomas was a student at the University of Kansas, and he would sometimes drive from Lawrence to Kansas City. As he commuted, he encountered an exit sign for Kill Creek. While he never took that exit, he felt Kill Creek would make a great title for a horror story. Upon that name and Thomas's plot coming together, his story began to grow. A few more contributing factors that inspired this novel included dying bookstores and the fame of social media. Aside from setting and plot, while Thomas's characters weren't specifically based on anyone, they were inspired by real-life authors. For example, Thomas said that while the Sam McGarver character is closely related to himself, Sam is a pop horror fiction writer like Stephen King or Peter Straub. Whereas although the character of T.C. Moore is a female, she originally was written as a man, and she was inspired by the works of Clive Barker. Her overall tone was inspired by an experience that Thomas had when he heard James Ellroy speak. Opposing the modern adulterated authors, Daniel Slaughter was inspired by the young adult horror works of R.L. Stine and Christopher Pike. And finally, Sebastian Cole was inspired by classic authors like Ray Bradbury, Robert Bloch, Shirley Jackson, H.P. Lovecraft, and Edgar Allan Poe. Well, now that we have that covered, it's time to move on to the spoiler segment, which, if you haven't read this book before, I'm about to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you. So, if you would like to click away, all you have to do is scroll down to the comments, and you'll see that I have a pinned comment at the top with a timestamp in it. And once you click this timestamp, it will direct you away from the spoilers and bring you to the thoughts section. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this. So, ready, set, go! Since everyone's had the opportunity to click away, I would like to talk about a few moments that took me by surprise. First up is when all of the authors did this weird form of obsessive automatic writing, which, leading up to this, after Halloween passes, we fast forward to April. And this is when we discover all of the authors who had participated in Wainwright's live stream have neglected everything in their life so they can write a novel inspired by the Finch House. And even though this has cured Sam's writer's block, we eventually see that all of these authors are forced to write non-stop, because if they don't, the ghost from their past will haunt them. But after going through this torment for the past few months, all of a sudden, one day, Sam, TC, and Daniel have no idea what else to write, and their ghosts quit haunting them. Upon starting this book, I honestly didn't think the plot was going to advance past the Finch House property. Like, I really thought this was going to be similar to Hill House and the horror was going to be contained. But as I continued to read, all I could think was WTF when the authors started doing their weird form of automatic writing. Then I remembered there were actually two scenes that foreshadowed this concept. For example, we have the scene where TC and Sam were talking about how one another would write about the Finch house. But the biggest hint was at the beginning of this book when Sam was giving a lecture on Gothic horror and he used the ring as an example to show how horror could go widespread from one central point. Anywho, despite the hints, I had become so invested in this book, I was completely blindsided by the concept that these authors would have to write in order to survive. Similar to what we saw with the protagonist in The Ring, where she had to make copies of the cursed VHS in order to outlast the 7-day time span. So, because of how all of this came together, I really love how the author was able to keep me so engaged, and at the same time, how he was able to add his own spin onto the concept of The Ring, where instead of a VHS being responsible for spreading the horror, he used other forms of art, like books. Another moment that I didn't see coming was when Dr. Aderdell spilled all the beans. Now, leading up to this, TC, Sam, Daniel, and Wainwright have gathered to try to figure out what the hell is going on. And since no one can get a hold of Sebastian, they decide to track down Dr. Aderdell, who had written a nonfiction book about the Finch house called Ghost of the Prairie. Well, after they arrive at Aderdell's, they discover that Sebastian beat them there because, unlike them, he actually finished his manuscript. But even still, he had questions. Then, as they're comparing notes, they discover that because Sebastian finished his manuscript, the power that had been terrorizing them into writing stopped because they were no longer needed. At this point, Aderdell reveals that the Finch house had honestly been nothing more than a house, and after its homeowner and his lover died, that's when locals started making up urban legends about the property being haunted. Yet it wasn't until these ghost stories started to circulate that the Finch house started to show paranormal activity because it was the power of these stories that turned the house bad. After that, Aderdell admits that when he went to the Finch house, Rebecca had already died and he interviewed who he believed was Rachel, which, upon them speaking, she suggested that he should exaggerate the haunting in his book to create strength for the Finch house, because unbeknownst to Dr. Aderdell, the house had actually lost strength because locals had quit talking about how it was supposedly haunted. So, due to Rachel needing people to remember that the house was a thing to be feared, she used Dr. Aderdell as nothing more than a tool so he could revive the house with power by using his written word. But once his book stopped selling, people stopped talking about the house, and in turn, this caused the Finch house to become dormant. However, the real kicker was when Dr. Aderdell admitted to the group that Wainwright's live stream happened at the Finch house not by chance, but it happened because he sent an out-of-print copy of his book to Wainwright, hoping that Wainwright would do some type of gimmick where the house could be noticed and become popular once again. Y'all, until I read Kill Creek, I had honestly never been confronted with the concept of a house being haunted simply because the rumors about it were so strong, they created this concentrated psychic power that eventually made the house live up to its reputation. And I really find it interesting and kind of humorous that at the beginning of this book, Thomas contradicts what Shirley Jackson had said with Hill House, which in her book, she explained that Hill House had simply been born bad. But under this circumstance, Thomas says that the Finch house was simply nothing more than a house. It was built with ordinary items and there was no witch or warlock. And to be honest, this concept totally blew my mind, and it scared the ever-loving living hell out of me because it made me wonder, if you truly believed your house was haunted when it wasn't, could the power of your belief actually make it manifest a haunting? The final moment that shocked the hell out of me was the grand reveal. Now, leading up to this, Sam, TC, Daniel, Sebastian, and Wainwright had returned to the Finch house to defeat it. But in the process, Daniel got manipulated by the house, and he went on this killing spree where he was able to murder everyone except Sam and TC. Then, after this really kick-ass, intense game of cat and mouse unfolded, Sam was able to gain the upper hand, set the Finch house on fire, kill Daniel, then ride off with TC. From there, we fast forward to December, only to discover that Sam has gotten back with his wife and he's completed a book. Also, TC's doing pretty well herself because she's also finished a new book. However, after gaining that information, the book ends with a radio interview that features Sam and TC. And even though they had agreed to never speak about the Finch house again for fear that their words could give it power, this is when Sam comes to realize that the only reason TC survived everything is because she made a deal with the house. Then, out of nowhere, while they're live, TC announces that she has just finished a tell-all book about the Finch house, and it is soon to be released. Never in a million years did I ever expect this book to end this way. Like, for starters, I thought Sam and TC were going to get together after they escaped the Finch house. But after it revealed that Sam had gotten back with his wife, I was like, okay, well, I didn't really see the book ending this way, but at least the horror's over. Then, when TC dropped the bomb, I was like, should have seen it coming. Should have seen it coming, because when she was down in that basement with Daniel, there ain't no way in hell she would have survived everything had she not made a deal with the house. And I was just so invested in everything, like the escapism and the intensity that was thrown at me. I should have paid attention to the red flags, but no, I didn't. And after I read this, I had no other choice but to just sit and stare blankly at a wall and think, "Ma damn, the rug truly was yanked out from under me." I would like to take this opportunity to bitch about assholes like Sam's mom, TC's ex, and those racist dipshits who killed Alma and Josh. But the only problem is, these antagonists aren't even secondary characters. Like, they're way, way, way in the background of the story. And even though they have little to no page time, they do still move the plot along and they do affect the protagonist. It's just, I don't have enough information on these enema bags so I can rip them a new asshole. Well, aside from those bastards, we have characters like Rachel, TC, and Daniel, who, in my opinion, actually weren't bad people until they were manipulated by the house. And to be honest, I tend to think if I were in their shoes, I would end up doing the same thing, because they were honestly backed into a corner. And not only that, but the house knows your secrets and it knows how to use those against you. Anywho, maybe the true villains of this book were those gossiping little assholes who couldn't keep their mouths shut. Like, seriously, had they just minded their own damn business, then maybe we wouldn't be up shit creek without a paddle. But, of course, here we are. And in this regards, perhaps this is a cautionary tale. I mean, it shows us the damages that gossip can bring. So maybe what we need to do is, when we see someone who's talking shit, just go ahead and slap that taste right out of their mouth. I mean, if they want to fuck around, then for the greater good, help them find out. Kill Creek by Scott Thomas wasn't what I thought it would be because I had seen it pop up in multiple lists with it being classified as a slasher. But after reading this, I really feel like it fits better into the subgenre of paranormal horror or gothic horror. Aside from that, this book has a great diversity of characters, and despite how polar opposite they all were, I quickly became married to each of them. And as far as themes are concerned, this book really focuses on the power of belief and gossip. Also, it comments on domestic horrors, the entertainment industry, as well as losing your faith and much more. Character-wise, I really love how everyone interacted because we had entertaining moments of nagging, bickering, tenderness, and even humor. Not to mention there was a grandfatherly type of character who seemed like he had a heart of gold. Also, I was really surprised to see that even though these four main protagonists were polar opposite, I saw myself reflected in them. May that reflection be positive or negative. And because of how I could relate, when something bad happened to them, the shock hit me that much harder. Theme-wise, I believe the main focus of this book regards how powerful gossip and belief can be. And even though I would love to elaborate, I honestly can't due to spoilers. But similar to what happened with the Finch house, there is a moment when Dr. Aderdale gives an example of a friend of his who had been a faithful husband. But one day, there started to be some rumors circulating about how this friend was a cheater. And those rumors became so bad it destroyed his life. So, as he remained faithful, one day this friend decided, I might as well live up to everyone's expectations. My life has been ruined anyway because of it, so for that reason, he decides to cheat. Along with how gossip can make a person live up to the stories that are being circulated, another contributing factor that affected the Finch house was the power of belief. And because of how belief can be very damaging when compared with gossip, this book shows how belief, in this regards, can add more fuel to the fire. Which, because of how everything goes down, I think Thomas presented a great cautionary tale that shows the repercussions of believing false accusations. Aside from that, domestic horrors are greatly commented on throughout this book, especially when it comes down to characters like Sam and TC, because they've honestly gone through some pretty extreme stuff. But then we have the milder cases such as Daniel and Sebastian. Now, under the extreme circumstances, such as Sam and TC, we see that they are physically and mentally scarred for a lifetime due to what they had suffered. To give examples of how domestic horrors can traumatize an individual for life, due to what Sam had gone through during his childhood, as an adult, he's on medication, he suffers scar tissue, and he's afraid to start his own family. Whereas because of the abuse that TC undergoes, she has a disfigured pupil and she puts up this shield where she feels like she has to be hardcore in order to protect herself from the public. Then, compared to the physical and mental trauma that Sam and TC had suffered, we have where Daniel is scarred from an event that happened during his childhood. Which, by the way, if you have arachnophobia, this particular moment will not be your cup of tea. But nonetheless, because of where Daniel was trapped, he had prayed to God to save him. And upon him being saved, Daniel became a devout Christian. But as we continue to read, we learn that his Christianity had only acted as a band-aid to get him through life. No differently than Sam being medicated or TC putting up a defensive wall. Also, we have Sebastian who had taken care of his blind father. And even though it's never indicated that Sebastian had come from an abusive background, due to the circumstance his father went through, Sebastian believes true horror is going blind and ending up in the nursing home, as he's now reached that level in life where he's outlived everyone closest to him. But in one way or another, we're painted a strong portrait of artists who not only suffer for their art, but they suffer from the trauma that stemmed at home. And even though some of these artists use band-aids to get through life, we eventually see that those band-aids are only temporary. Another subject that Kill Creek presents is how minorities either have to conform or be ruthless when they're a part of the entertainment industry. Which, a good example of this is one of the characters who's gay admits that he had to stay in the closet because he was afraid of not only how his wife would react, but how his readers would react and how that would affect his book sales. Which this is a very accurate depiction of how it was, and to some degree still is, even though LGBTQ plus authors are more accepted now than they were 10 years ago. Opposing him is TC's character, who has to be ruthless in order to be taken seriously. Which, a good example of this is when movie producers explain to her that her book is being watered down into a PG-13 teenage romance for the theater, so it will get more ticket sales. And even though she's not happy about this, they explain there's nothing she can do about it because she signed a contract. And while this book-to-movie treatment is fairly common, I do think that the blatant disrespect that they gave TC would have been very different had she been a man. And last is the subject of losing your religion, which, to be honest, I've been there. So when this came up in the book, it was something I could relate to. And without giving away any spoilers, I think the book did a great job of showing that no matter how devout a person might be, everyone still has their breaking point and it's only human. Which, in my opinion, this circumstance comments on how people use religion as a band-aid, and when that band-aid falls off and they're faced with reality, they don't know how to cope. Kill Creek scared the ever-loving living hell out of me, and because of what happened when the authors returned to the Finch house, it will forever haunt me. Which, obviously, this book totally creeped me out, but it did not gross me out. Kill Creek by Scott Thomas is definitely included among the scariest books I've read this year. And because of how frightening it was, I totally plan to read more books by this author. Also, even though a good portion of this takes place in October, there's a good chunk that takes place in April. So if you're fiending for something Halloween related in the spring, this could be the ideal go-to. But if you have some trigger warnings in regards to spousal abuse and spiders, then this might not be the book for you. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for a great gothic-themed horror novel that features an iconic haunted house that will haunt you long after you finish your read, then I highly recommend Kill Creek. Well, now that that's covered, it's time for me to thank these amazing people for contributing to my Patreon account. As you can tell, some of the names listed here are creators, so be sure to check out their work. And if you would like to contribute to my Patreon account, I have a link available in the description section of this episode, where for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos, and if there's a certain profession you would like to have included with your name, just let me know and I'll add that as well. Also, I do have a $10 tier available, as I do creepy photography on the side, so at the beginning of every month, I'll send you over one of my creepy photos. From there, you can print it off, do whatever you like. And of course, this does include the shout out at the end. So if you're able to do this, that's awesome. If not, no sweat. I just hope you return to this channel so we can have a good time together. Also, if you would like to hit me up on social media, links to my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Hive are all available in the description section of this video. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell because I have more book reviews coming in the near future. So until we see each other again, I hope you have a great week and sweet nightmares.